Okay, I'm going to get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hebron Coalition on Diversity and Equity's 6th Community Conversation. Tonight's conversation is on creating housing choices in rural towns. My name is Amy DiMatteo, and I co-chair the Hebron Code, along with Donna Jolly. I'm glad you could join us for what we believe will be a thought-provoking, honest, and important discussion. First, a little background on Code. Code was formed in July 2020 by a group of town residents following the death of George Floyd in the first ever rally for racial justice in Hebron. Our mission is to build a more diverse, equitable, and vibrant community. Our goals include increasing community awareness and equal access to housing, education, and jobs. Community conversations like this one are an important part of our work. We believe through education, people can better understand the impact of segregation on ourselves, on our children, and our community, and the benefits of becoming a more diverse community. Today, we are going to talk about why it's important for rural towns to create an array of housing choices for residents of all ages and stages of their lives, of all economic status, and for those who would like to benefit from all that a high opportunity town like Hebron has to offer. This is particularly timely since every town in Connecticut is required by the state to prepare an affordable housing plan by June of this year. We have a phenomenal group of individuals to help us learn and also break down some of the challenges of creating housing options. We are grateful to the Hartford Foundation for providing funding for this conversation, as well as others that we will have on this topic throughout the year. First, for some tips on engaging in tonight's webinar discussion. If you have a question, and we hope you will, please share it through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll use these for Q&A portion of our meeting. If you want to share a comment, please feel free to use the chat feature. Now, we realize that some of these issues are difficult to discuss and sometimes invoke strong emotions. Our goal is to create a safe environment so everyone can feel comfortable in this space. I encourage everyone to be honest and also empathetic and respectful. Our first two speakers will share with us successful efforts to create mixed income and affordable housing in their communities. First, we're going to hear from Kate Briggs Johnson. Kate is the president of the Foundation for Norfolk Living. The mission of the Foundation for Norfolk Living is to create housing opportunities in Norfolk that are affordable to a diverse community, including persons and families of modest means. Kate is an architect who has received her undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia School of Architecture and a master's from the University of Washington, Seattle. She's also involved in other community groups, including the Economic Development Commission. In the past, she has been a member of the Norfolk Land Trust, the Board of Finance, the Norfolk Energy Task Force, the Building Committee for Habitat, Otella Elementary School's Board of Education, and the Norfolk Library. So after Kate, we're going to hear from Jim Crawford, who's a member of the Advisory Council for Hope Partnership. Hope Partnership is a nonprofit organization dedicated to developing affordable workforce housing opportunities in southern Middlesex County. Established in 2003 with the support of the United Way, its philosophy is to collaborate with town government, builders, and other private partners to build housing that is attractive, sustainable, and appropriate to the surrounding neighborhood. Jim Crawford has also served as a legislator in the Connecticut General Assembly, representing District 35 from 2011 to 2013. Has served as selectman of Westbrook, chairman of the town's Economic Development Commission, and a member of the board of directors of the Westbrook Foundation. And as president of the Old Saybrook Westbrook Exchange Club, an organization with the goal of preventing child abuse. For his day job, Jim is a social studies teacher at Westbrook Middle School for over 35 years. previously served in the United States Army as a race relations officer. Jim earned his BA in history from Providence College and an MA in urban studies and psychology from Southern Connecticut State University. So Kate, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
I'm thinking they can.
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. Amy, in a moment, I'd like you to start the video. The following video was done as part of the Northwest Hills Council of Governments Housing Council. The organization is a collection of towns in Northwestern Connecticut. Our affordable housing groups meet quarterly to discuss different housing issues. When the state required the housing plans to be developed for each town, a number of our towns got together and created the following video to promote affordable housing and explain what affordable housing is. And Amy, can you start that video?
Sure thing.
The Northwest Council of Governments did a study of all the towns in their region. In Washington, there's over 1,000 people who commute here to work.
People are moving away because really it doesn't make sense to live here. It's too expensive. And we're not going to change food prices. We're not going to change the gasoline prices. We can very reasonably provide lower cost housing.
It's been clear over the past 10 years that there's a much greater need for rental housing than we supposed.
I think the average age is something like 60, and we need to attract young families or the town will die.
The state projections are, in 20 years, by 2040, the population is going to diminish by about 22% to 2,400 people. And the population right now is about 3,500.
People need to understand that in order to have a vibrant community, one needs to have a good variety of economic incomes in it. And we need to take care of the nurses and healthcare workers, etc.
The affordable rental housing is really the entry point for a lot of these young families. But it's also a place where kids who grew up here can come back and establish themselves. The fact is that the people who move here are doing the work that otherwise they might have to drive an hour to get here. And that's essential for the town. So it benefits the town and it benefits...
Yeah, and they're paying rent. They pay it not more than a third of their income, but that's the way you can live nowadays. You can't pay more than a third of your income.
Where are we going? I mean, because this is essentially becoming, not literally, but figuratively, it's a gated community. The population here is going to drop, as I said. The strain that's going to put on local government, as they're having difficulty finding volunteers now for the fire department, EMTs.
When I was looking out, I was watching people walk out to talk, go back to their homes, check their mailboxes. They tend to look out for each other. Kent Affordable Housing built this, South Common. It opened in 2003 with 24 units. We have a range of people from a newborn who was arrived just after the family arrived to live here, up to elderly, and they work all over town. Some of them are retired. The 4 acres here, they belong to the town. It's not on the road. The entry road was built. It wasn't doing anything but sitting here.
People who've lived here at Cougaman have moved on to the parcel program, been able to move into homeownership. Some have moved to Bonnybrook as they got older and needed a 1-story house. We've had a couple of high school valedictorians here. We've had members of the fire department. We've had people who work in the service trades. There are people who work as school staff. About as random as any other slice of Cornwall.
The new unit in the back has 2 2-bedroom and 2 3-bedroom units. Included in the folks who live there are some essential workers. There's teachers, there's a school bus driver, there are folks who work in retail. There's someone who works at Le Bon's. There's someone who works at one of the restaurants. We are really filling a need, I think, very much in the community. And many of those people would have to live, 45 an hour away.
At our town center rentals, we have people that are in the 20% of AMI, the 50% bracket, the 80% bracket, and then we have some unrestricted units. Department of Housing feels it's really important to have a variety of different income levels. The types of people that are in our rental units are everybody from teachers to some landscapers to a chef. Generally speaking, they're very much members of the community and have been members of the community for a long time, and they just need a little bit of assistance.
The moment I found out that I was going to be able to get the apartment at 4 Shepherd Road, it's a 1-level apartment. I really needed to be able to get into a space where I didn't have to do stairs, and it was much easier for me to move. I had a lot of back issues. I really don't have the words to express how much they have helped me and how much I appreciate it. They were really able to work with me as far as how much I was making and what I could pay, and they were able to get my son and I into one of the apartments.
The 2 houses here, brand new. The farmhouse, we totally renovated. Everything in it is new. Windows, roof, all new mechanicals. The way we set this up is we own the land underneath this, and then we do a 99-year lease. We are responsible for, when the properties are resold, to see that they are resold to people meeting those same area median income levels. The ideal thing would be to find other houses like this that we could take the land and subdivide, but right now, the cheapest house in Washington is about $549,000. Typically there's around 70 to 80 houses on the market. Right now there's 24.
Where we are right now was built in the 1980s. It was very controversial. There were stinging letters written to the paper. It was not at all certain that people would be happy with it. In time, and it didn't take very long, it was understood to be essential and respected and enjoyed. Our small towns are not asked to pay for construction or operation of affordable housing. Therefore, property taxes in our towns do not increase by adding these types of housing opportunities. Construction funding comes primarily through the Connecticut Department of Housing, and we're very grateful for their essential partnership in creating new affordable housing options here. Our property managers also carefully vet all applicants who wish to live here, including income and background checks. Most applicants have close ties to the town already. They're moving to be closer to work or family. The professional property managers we hire to manage day-to-day operations, like Tammy here at Sarum Village, are terrific.
And the other thing that I think is very important as grandmother is that we've also brought some children to school.
There are solar panels at Stewart Farm on 8 of the 13 units. The first summer, their electric bills were $9.12 a month because the sun was out beautifully. I've given you all the upsides. The downside is there's not enough because it takes 5 years to build a complex like this.
The good part is there are good people like Jocelyn and Maggie Cooley, who I work with up in Cornwall, and lots of other people, the back racks over in Kent. There are just lots of dedicated people that, put not just their financial resources, but, their time, which is more precious than anything, into, meeting these needs.
The Cornwall Housing Corporation has benefited from the generosity of people in town, from the Cougamans who gave the money that permitted the purchase of this lot 10 years ago, when we had to suddenly come up with the money to buy the lot on which Bonnybrook stands. People were hugely supportive.
We received a donation of another 4-acre parcel here in town, so we're hoping to move forward on another project fairly soon. Abraham Lincoln said, "Public sentiment is everything." With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And so the public sentiment has got to be accepting, here's the vision. After we've had town forums and discussions, all of you have had input. that we've got to implement, this plan that we've come up with to try and reach the goals that we set.
If you want to be able to go out to eat and have somebody wait your table, that person needs a place to live.
The way that affordable housing benefits a town like Salisbury is that it brings fresh life into the town.
I hope that the video will show people sort of the banality of affordable housing in our towns.
It's a real benefit to the town, but to the whole region. And every town needs it.
It's not charity, it's an investment. That's my top headline line.
Negative voices are usually louder than positive ones. If your town is currently creating an affordable housing plan, they need your participation now.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, a little bit about our organization and what we have done and where we're headed. I love Virginia's last comment, affordable housing, it's not charity, it's an investment. And I think that's a really important way to be looking at what we are all doing. The Foundation for Norfolk Living is an all-volunteer nonprofit housing group with the goal of promoting affordable housing in Norfolk. Essentially, we are a developer. And looking to create affordable housing, there are a couple of key items to pay attention to. Given that affordable housing is defined as 80% of area median income or less, there will always be people that qualify. And these are people, are teachers, healthcare workers, tradesmen, and the people that we need to have a complete and vibrant community. Housing costs have become disproportionately expensive and a burden. In developing affordable housing, there's always a gap between what it costs to produce the affordable housing, produce and maintain it, and a gap with what people are able to spend. And that gap is what we as nonprofit affordable housing developers are always looking for. We're looking how to fund that. Another important factor in how to develop affordable housing is its location. To date, our sites have all been within walking distance of town on public water and sewer, and they've been very well integrated into the community. And we'll give you a little bit more information on these projects that we've created. The first one is called the Town Center Rentals. And this one came out of, this is a combination of 5 different houses. These first 2 of the Shepherd Road property we started on, and then we were gifted the Burr properties. I'll give you a little bit more information on that. As initially, we thought we were going to be working on this project, and I think as a developer, you have to be very flexible. And when this was going to be a joint venture between us, the Foundation for Norfolk Living, and a for-profit developer. The for-profit developer would have done the market rate homes, and we would have provided the affordable homes. Are you able to see my slideshow?
I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing it.
Did you share your screen?
I think so. Apologies. Can you see it now?
No.
No. How about now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, my apologies. Any rate, we'll move forward here. So these two houses were the Shepherd Road properties, and these three are the Burr property. We initially started with a cluster housing development, and when 2008 and the housing crisis hit, the for-profit developer decided not to continue on. And we fortunately had some pre-development loan money. And that meant that we went looking for a new project. And we started looking around town, and we found these two houses that were on adjacent pieces of property. And the single family house and a two-family house. And we said, wow, if we could combine these into one piece of property and make the single family into a two-family and the two-family into a four-family, then we would have 6 units. And we understood that the Department of Housing would fund a project with 6 units or more. And that sounded awfully good. So we asked the Department of Housing if we could move our pre-development loan money from the original cluster development to this, and they said yes. And so we got underway. And as we were going through the planning and zoning process, Mr. Burr, who owned these 3 houses, all of which are two families, so 6 more units, offered to give us these units. Now, Mr. Burr was in his 80s. These properties have been in his family since early 1900s, and he had rented them out, mowing the lawns himself while he was in his 80s, no debt service on the property, and just breaking even. So basically, he was providing affordable housing himself and wanted to maintain it in perpetuity. And as a result, by giving us these properties, we were able to weave them into the same grant application with Department of Housing. And so we were able to create a total of 12 affordable rental apartments called the Town Center Rentals. And as you can see, there's a before and an after, and a before and an after. So we added a large wing to the back of the brick building, which accommodated 2 more units. And once it was a 4 apartment complex, it needed to be sprinklered. So we added those as well as a complete renovation. And all of these 5 buildings are in the historic district, and we needed to preserve the historic structures. So this beautiful curved stair just got fluffed and buffed and is still there in all its glory. Once we completed that project, we were ready for the next one. And it's Haystack Woods is an affordable housing project, which is in the wings. We are currently in the process of getting funding for it. We started on this project in 2018, so we're almost 4 years into it. And we may break ground this year if we're lucky. This project, that original cluster home site was still available, and the owners of the property were willing to work with us. So we have an option to purchase it. We will donate 50%, actually probably more likely put an conservation easement on 50% for open space, and the other 50% we're going to create 10 net zero homes in what was formerly a gravel pit. At one point, we were looking at 19 homes. This model was done when we were looking at 19 homes. Now we're looking at doing 10 homes, but it gives you a sense of what it is. The brown buildings are carports, and they will have solar, and the white buildings are little models of what the houses would be. The site is on town water and town sewer. It's walking distance to town, and it's also walking distance to Haystack State Park. This is a site plan showing you the configuration of the site and of the units. What is net zero? These buildings will be net zero. And a net zero building or complex produces as much energy as it uses in the course of a year. I had the fortune of working in my private practice on a net zero house in 2015, which we applied for and tied for first place for the Connecticut Net Zero Energy Challenge. This was the Katzen House, and it was an inspiration for this project. I'm not the architect because I'm on the board. I can't be for these homes at Haystack Woods, but the homes are patterned after this home. And it's a remarkable home. It's built with panelized concrete walls and open web trusses and SIPS panels. The HERS rating is a -12. Its energy use is almost nothing. When we don't run the heat in the winter and very cold days, it holds its temperature for several days running. It's run on just one mini split, and it's about 1,200 square feet. And it served as a really good prototype for what this new project will be. And as we talked about this project with the Department of Housing and we're selling it, we were explaining that we're trying to keep the total cost of ownership down, keeping the cost of construction down, keeping the cost of utilities down, and very importantly, keeping the cost of maintenance down. The homes have got a little bit more of a Victorian style to them than the original prototype, blending in with Norfolk's Victorian character, and taking us to Norfolk's Victorian character a little further is the Royal Arcanum building. And this is our latest venture in affordable housing. It's a beautiful old brick building. And we are partnering with the Norfolk Foundation to renovate and preserve 5 apartments in this building. The middle floor of this building has 5 apartments. They have been affordable in terms of their rentals, but haven't been maintained, don't have an affordability, meet the affordability requirements in terms of Department of Housing and on the list of affordable. And they will become when we renovate them. So that is it. I will turn it over to Jim now.
Thank you, Kate. Let me see if we can get my, there I am. So I am Jim Crawford. I work for, I volunteer for the HOPE Partnership. HOPE is an acronym for Housing Opportunities for People Everywhere. And for those of you who are familiar with Southern Connecticut, we're pretty much bounded by the towns of Old Lyme, over to Madison and up to Haddam. So it's kind of a lower Middlesex County volunteer nonprofit organization that came about in 2003. I also have a video for you that I think gives a lot of good background about HOPE. One of our key decisions very early on was, once we had our first project built, we wanted to help people understand who lived there, who were the folks who were there. So we made it a very personal video that we're about to see. And once we're done with that, we can talk a little bit about how HOPE has evolved since then. This was our first project that was completed in a very short period of time and wound up being opened in 2014. So let's go to that video, Amy, and we'll take a look.
I'm one of those people that's actually living in affordable housing. I work, I support myself. I'm finishing up my college degree.
It helped me out a lot, gave me, give me a roof over my head, and it gave me confidence and self-respect again.
My unit fits in this community. It doesn't stick out. It's not singled out as an affordable housing place to live.
The Connecticut shoreline is a great place to live and raise a family for those of us who can afford it. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer of us will be able to afford to buy or rent a house here. The prized quality of life on the Connecticut shoreline is in danger because affordable housing is becoming scarce. We all need to take time to learn more about the challenge we face and work towards overcoming them.
When you're fresh out of college or fresh out of technical school or any one of those things, to be able to afford a home in the town you grew up in can be a challenge.
Affordable housing lets our people who grew up in the community, who want to give back to the community, stay in the community.
So our approach, Hope's approach, is to say, let's take this problem and let's solve it ourselves. Let's put together a group of citizens that are concerned about it, that understand it, and can come up with the right place, the right location, the right design, and serve the people that they want to serve.
An ample supply of housing is critical in Connecticut to keep jobs and maintain strong neighborhoods and families. But Connecticut builders have not been producing enough housing to keep up with the need.
Builders are not generally building starter homes anymore. They're building large McMansions that are out of reach of most first-time home buyers, and there's almost no rental options on the shoreline. So we felt as a board, as an organization, that rental housing was really going to be our priority, and we would look for ways to support home ownership as well, but rental housing was something we felt was the real need.
The challenge with affordable housing is to find abutting neighbors and a community that is receptive to either incentive zone housing or affordable housing. Ferry Crossing was an example of that. The community was very accepting of that.
In 2012, a 16-unit rental community known as Ferry Crossing opened in Old Saybrook. Ferry Crossing was completed through a partnership of Hope and the Women's Institute for Housing and Economic Development on land provided by the town of Old Saybrook. It was financed by state and federal grants and a loan from the Federal Home Loan Bank. The development was designed with local architecture in mind and fits in with the current neighborhood.
Having housing that fits into the neighborhood and is well designed and looks good is something that was really, really important to Hope Partnership. And we knew that when we built something, everyone was going to be looking at it and saying that's what they're talking about. So we knew that we needed a really good architect, we needed a really good design, and we needed a really good location.
What needs to happen to make affordable housing work within the community? You need, I think, primarily to take a little bit of the stigma away. At Ferry Crossing, we have exceptional design on those buildings. I had many of my friends say to me, what are those houses going up over by Ferry Crossing, because they were interested in buying them. I think that is an important step towards getting the community to say, yeah, affordable housing is something we want here.
Hope came and put up window boxes for me. The first spring I was here, and I vowed that I would have the best looking window boxes on the street, and I do.
Well, as soon as I moved in here, I wanted to get involved in Old Saybrook, become a part of the town. When I was with Guilford, I was active with the church. I'd even started my own community programs. And I definitely wanted to give back. So I immediately joined the volunteer fire department here in Old Saybrook. And it's a great department. There's a lot to do. Yeah, they welcomed me too.
Of the 16 units that were built here, almost half of them are people with ties to the local area. So they were people that either worked for a local employer. There's a couple folks here that work for the town, or they work for some local company, or they grew up here.
Although the situation surrounding how they came to need our help may differ, there is one common thread. They are all making the most of their opportunity for a new beginning.
I was living in Old Saybrook in a house on the Sound in another part of the town, leading a very comfortable middle-class life. Excuse me, I get emotional. And my husband of 38 years fell down the stairs head first. His Medicare ran out, his supplemental insurance ran out, and I was left for the last month of his life, I was left with a $400,000 bill.
I owned my own business. I was active in my hometown. I was a family man. I just fell in hard times. I was a veteran.
And life sometimes throws curveballs.
And coming from a place where I'd owned my own home and planned everything out, and having a son that was facing possible heart surgery, that was a lot to have to think about, you know, where we're gonna live. Not just to get by, but to really be successful for myself and my son. So for the people that say not in my backyard, I'm really the girl next door. I mean, I'm the one that would be living in your backyard, and I can tell you that I'm just so thankful that the community came together to have this opportunity for so many families, because there's a lot of people that plan everything, that do everything by the book, do it correctly, and sometimes things happen in life and you find yourself in a situation where you just need another chance, and this is really what it was for us. So, and I'll forever be thankful for that.
It's a beautiful place to live. I'm very proud of it. It's a place you can be proud of. I'd say that they should take a look at what Hope is doing, because the way they plan the affordable housing, you don't know it's affordable housing. There is nothing that makes it different from any other dwelling in a community. It blends in. It doesn't stand out. They're doing a great job.
And we could say, this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about what you might think affordable housing looks like. It's high quality housing. It's the kind of housing that you or I or anyone we know would be proud to live in. And it's really, I think, created a model for how other communities, other towns like Old Saybrook can do something similar. And so it really takes the wind out of the sails of somebody who says, I don't want this in my neighborhood. Because when they look at this, you can see it in their face. They think to themselves, wow, this is what they're talking about. And this is beautiful. And I would love to have something like this in my neighborhood.
The public comment at the zoning meetings has been very positive. Our zoning commission has been very receptive. And there really has been no controversy about accepting affordable housing because it's been done right. And I think with a zoning commission that is highly educated on the process, they then can communicate to the developer and to the community that this is the right thing for our community.
And to say that they're full-time workers and they can't afford to live in our area or even the surrounding area is really shame on us. We need to look at what we can provide as a community.
Thank you, Amy. So a couple of things that are in ways similar to what Kate presented on Northwest Corner, but in other ways a little more unique. You know, there's a perception about this part of the state that it's very tourist oriented. There are folks come down here to have fun in the nice weather. We have more marinas than we know what to do with. We have great restaurants, but we also have folks who live here year round who help support that tourism industry. And it's a real problem. We have a situation here where a lot of the rentals are academic rentals. Now, these are rentals that are essentially from the middle of September to the middle of May. Folks who own summer houses rent them out during the academic year. And there is a whole transitory portion of the population. As a teacher for all those years, we could tell when the transitions were starting to take place, because kids who had been there all year were gone, or they were frequently falling asleep because now they were in a campground or they'd gone to another town to live with a relative and were being driven into school. So it was kind of a problem that begged for a solution. We started in 2003 from a church group that had done a after-school homework club. And they found that a huge number of kids who were in this after-school homework club were living in motels along Route 1 that would have been occupied in the summer, but were weekly and monthly rentals in the winter. So they did the grassroots work, and they are the ones who brought hope to fruition. We are in the process of updating this video. At the time we made it, there was still a lot surrounding who lives in these places and what do they look like. I'm happy to say that at least in our part of the state, a lot of that has been dispelled. A lot of people are beginning to understand that most of the folks that are in need of affordable housing live here already. They're within our community, or they're struggling to stay in our community. A couple of interesting points about that. We have an independent school district in Westbrook, and at its height, it was always small, but we had 1,500 kids in the district. We're down to 700, and a large part of that is young people not having children, but it's also young people who can't afford to come back to Westbrook and who would like to be here, but it's just out of their price range. So some really positive stuff. Last March, we opened up 17 new units in the lofts in Centerbrook, which is a section of Essex. What it was essentially a sort of failing commercial enterprise. And it was a 2.5-story building. And what we were able to do was to get the successful commercial operations to go to the first floor, and we completely renovated the second portion of the top floor into 17 units. We had 172 inquiries about those 17 units, and 17 families got to move in, but there are still 100 who qualified on the waiting list. So we know the need is really, really huge. We have another great opportunity on the horizon. There will be 32 new units built in Madison, hoping to get the ground broken this year. And we've had great cooperation from that community. I don't think it's too mercenary of me to say that we get a foothold in Madison and show that community what can be done. It can only be beneficial for Hope, because there's some deep pockets in that town. There's some folks who care, and we're excited about being able to open up 32 units there and essentially double the number that we have. Our biggest problem is finding property. So as the video said, we went from 2012 until 2021 trying to find a property and then finally bringing it to fruition. So it does take a while. We have a problem down here because there are no city sewers. There are no sewers down here to speak of. So finding appropriate properties can be difficult, but we're encouraged by the heightened availability of commercial spaces that can be used for conversion to housing. The pandemic, if it had any positive effects, one of them might be that people began to understand that productivity wasn't going to plummet in some businesses if people stayed in their homes to work. So a consequence is that there are more properties available for commercial that were commercially owned than ever in the past. So that's where we are with Hope, and I encourage you to go to the Hope website. We continue to put out information that we think is vital to our region, and we continue a very successful cooperation with the Connecticut Housing Department. So with that, Amy, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. I am going to ask Kate to turn on her video, and we have a few questions, and I was wondering, we have a few minutes if you guys might be able to answer a few questions.
Sure.
based on your presentation. So the first question is, who provided your pre-development fund beyond the Department of Housing? Oh, he is typing an answer right now. Oh, it says, do you have an answer for that?
How about I thought about typing the answer?
Okay.
Yeah, in both of our projects to date, the pre-development loan money came from the Department of Housing. That being said, one of the things that happens when you put these projects together as a nonprofit developer is you still get the developer's fee, and the developer's fee can end up being seed money for the next project. So in fact, our Haystack Woods project, we went through a good deal of design work and getting the options and assessments and appraisals, et cetera, on our own dime before we got pre-development loan money for it. And we were able to do that effectively from the seed money from the previous project. So yeah, but they have all been done so far with Department of Housing.
Yeah, we were able to raise some funds. We had several fundraisers, so we had some money available. But we also, and I joined the partnership later than this, but the founders had tremendous insight. They insisted that the area banks have representatives, and those representatives turned out to be tremendous advocates. So in many cases, we got very low interest loans from Guilford, Essex, Liberty Bank. They're just wonderful cooperation. We continue to have board members who are major officers on those boards of directors, and it's been a very valuable tool. I saw another question about how do we do it without sewers. You have to have a lot of room for big septic tanks. That's pretty much what our issue is. And there has been, well, it's been a long battle. I won't bore you with all the details, but it's at least a 40 to 50 year battle over this with the state over sewer avoidance and how to go about doing this. And in my lifetime, there won't be sewers in my part of the state, I'm sure, because it's just been a real sore point. So you can imagine how that intensifies the problem of trying to find a piece of property for a little bit higher density development. You really need some room to be able to put in those systems. We do have city water in all projects.
Okay, so moving on to another question. What do you have any advice for convincing town members who they're expecting to object? Like, how do you bring about the support that you're needing, like, to move these projects forward?
There was a concerted effort when Hope began to do a lot of outreach before anything was presented to the town for formal acceptance. So church groups, civic organizations, schools, any opportunity to get in front of people was a high priority for the volunteers. And when they went before, as Carl Fortuna, the first selectman, pointed out, when they went before zoning in Old Saybrook, there wasn't a single complaint. There wasn't a single complaint at planning. There wasn't a single complaint in any of the public hearings. That they had done a terrific job talking about what affordable housing was, what it would look like, and how it would fit into the community. So Old Saybrook got very lucky. Most of you probably know the Baldwin Bridge, I-95 bridge over the Connecticut River, that got rebuilt. And when they rebuilt it, they used a construction site very near where the bridge is. And that construction site was owned by the state. The state offered to clean it up and sell it to the town of Old Saybrook for $1. So that's how they came up with that property. So it was a fortuitous event.
Pete, did you want to talk?
Sure. I certainly getting the word out there in advance and helping people understand why affordable housing or workforce housing, as some call it, I don't think that's as good as affordable. There's lots of different names out there, but why it's important is very helpful. I think reminding people that 80% of area median income, what does that mean? And who is that? 20% of area median income is something different, but and why are we having the housing problems that we're having? What are the economics that are driving it? One of my favorite lines is to remind people when they say they don't want it. I'm like, well, have you had trouble finding a painter lately? And who mows your lawns? And who does this and who does that? And they pretty quickly realize that they actually are having trouble finding labor around here. And in fact, that may in part have to do with housing issues. And then I think, the video that we did and the video that you did, both of them really helped to destigmatize what affordable housing is and remind people that, everybody needs a roof over their head. And I think, but I do agree, getting the word out there early and asking people what are their concerns. We did that certainly with the Haystack Woods project, talking with neighbors in advance of going in front of planning and zoning and saying, hey, what do you think might be a problem? What are your concerns about this? And it certainly makes things move better.
I think you made a key point there, Kate. When people hear 80% of the median income, and you tell them in Old Saybrook, that's $84,000.
Yeah.
They look at you and say, no. I said, yes, that's what $84,000 is, 80% of the median income.
Yeah.
So it's important for people to hear those numbers, and then they gradually begin to recognize that, wow, that's very difficult for a large segment of the population.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have time for another question. I see here that
I saw one. Somebody asked about how did renters do? Are there vacancies that come up?
Mm-hmm.
How do renters hear about it? First of all, if vacancies come up, we maintain a waiting list. Property managers maintain a waiting list, and believe me, it's like a tsunami. When people hear that there are rentals available, the word gets out very quickly, and there are websites that are out there that people are aware of, or social services groups that are aware of new projects coming online or whatever. But there really isn't a problem finding people to venture in.
Okay.
There was also a question about 830G friendly and all of that. And that may be more into the weeds than we want to get into right now, but 830G is the state statute that says that affordable housing, if your development has at least 30% of affordable housing, you should sort of be able to build it the way you want to build it and kind of ignore P&Z as long as you've taken care of health, safety, and welfare issues. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting, in our town, it was asked whether we might want to do an 830G friendly application for Haystack Woods, because we were getting into some just difficult, unnecessary conversations and legal involvement and everything else. And I kept saying, I don't think that's what we want to do. I think our town really wants to support affordable housing and wants to have control over it and make sure it's being done well. But I think in a lot of cases, these 830G friendly things take a lot of pressure off of the local zoning boards or wetlands, well, not wetlands, local zoning boards. And that's meaningful and helpful.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Wondering, what is the average timeline between securing of a property to folks moving into the units?
Oh, it's difficult. Our second project was over 5 years. We had the site, lining up the financing, qualifying for the financing through housing. So it was a 5-year period. So folks didn't have to wait 5 years, but certainly there was a lengthy period from when we began to say, okay, we're going to take applications, and when they actually moved in.
Yeah, I think we were well over 5 years. We were probably closer to 6 or 7 years for the town center rentals. And Haystack Woods were coming into 4 years, and we haven't broken ground yet. So.
Okay, so I just wanted to, if you guys, we've got to move on to the next section, but Kate and Jim, if you have a moment, if you could check out these questions and maybe answer a few if you are able to, because we weren't able to get to them all, but not to worry, everybody. We will have some more question and answer at the end of the evening that we can go back to some of the questions that we didn't get to.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So let me, okay. Start. Okay. So I wanted to, I'll turn on my video for a moment. I think. Okay. So again, I want to thank Kate and Jim. That was an excellent presentations, and we're going to move on to Kasey and Matt. So we have with us this evening 2 program officers from the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC, Connecticut. LISC works with residents and partners to forge resilient and inclusive communities of opportunity, great places to live, work, visit, do business, and raise families. LISC is a national organization with program staff based in over 35 cities and many of the rural areas where LISC-supported community development takes shape. Matt Straub is the Senior Program Officer for Lending and Capacity Building with LISC. In addition to providing technical assistance to groups in urban, suburban, and rural Connecticut, Matt supports the development of new affordable housing through loans and grants made possible by corporate, government, and philanthropic support. Matt holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and a bachelor's degree of psychology and foreign languages from Roger Williams University. And Kasey LaFlam is a program officer at LISC. She is responsible for capacity building initiatives to support a broad portfolio of LISC Connecticut's community development partners. Kasey has 15 years experience in the nonprofit sector in positions ranging from program management to fund development in communities including Southwest New Hampshire, New York, and Washington, D.C. She also has a background in community planning. Kasey is a graduate of Columbia University with an MS in urban planning. She also holds a BA in social sciences from Keene State College. Matt and Kasey will share a little bit about the resources they provide to rural towns to create mixed income and affordable housing. Matt, did you want to start? You're on mute.
I think it'd be better than that after 2 years of remote work. So I apologize, we don't have a video today. The 2 videos you got to see were really fantastic though. So my name is Matt Straub. I'm a senior program officer with LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. I'm here with my colleague, Kasey LaFlam.
Hello, everyone.
So today, LISC is a really wide-ranging organization. We're what's known as the Community Development Finance Institution, or CDFI, where we provide loans and grants to developers, including nonprofits like Hope Partnership and Foundation for Norfolk Living, in the development of affordable housing and other community development opportunities. We also, through a partnership that is fully funded by the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, or CHFA, one of the major funders of affordable housing in Connecticut, operate a program called Housing Connections. So through this program, we offer technical assistance free of charge to local community groups like yourselves who are looking to potentially incorporate as a nonprofit development company, who can take on with professional support the development of affordable housing in rural and suburban communities. And our goal really is that we would be looking to focus on locally driven, high quality, affordable housing development. So rather than having large developers come in from out of state, out of your area, and try and build something that maybe doesn't meet your needs, you know your community best, and you know what the needs are, and we can help kind of understand those needs and refine them with your support to help develop a project that ultimately can receive funding and can be built. So we really look to you as leaders in your community who can, with our support, build consensus and support for housing development in the town of Hebron, with the ultimate goal of it being managed by this nonprofit as a community asset.
And as part of Housing Connections, there are different buckets of work that we do for that. So really it starts with a referral and an intake to the program. And that begins with outreach, and that happens in a variety of ways. Some of it is a bit more organic. Word of mouth in some parts of the state has been the most popular way that groups have made their way to the Housing Connections program. And other times we do a bit more proactive outreach. Specifically this past year in connecting with a lot of communities that are starting the work of creating their affordable housing plans, just letting them know what Housing Connections is and that we're a resource that can be available for them. Then typically what happens is we meet with groups and we talk with them. We get to learn about what their local needs are and what they're interested, what problems they see existing in their community, and help them talk through potential solutions for that. And there's 3 different areas that we work in, as I mentioned. So the first is really looking at planning and policy assistance, and then moving into organizational development, and then lastly, project development. So specifically what we talk about with really with policy assistance, or even other types of project planning, it is really getting to understand what the group's goals are. So helping them identify what resources already exist in their community, what is bringing them to the table today to have this conversation, and what are they hoping to achieve. Kate and Jim talked a lot about the successes that they've had, but what they didn't mention was all the planning work that really brought them to that stage. And there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens early on in really identifying what those needs are in the community and how to best address them. So then after we talk through with groups and they identify, yes, we're ready to move forward, and they've perhaps have already identified a specific parcel of land, or they have had conversations about buildings that can be donated, then the groups are really ready to dig in. And that's when we start to support with organizational technical assistance. So helping groups incorporate, so that way they can begin to tap into funding sources. Could be in the form of grants, it could be in the form of pre-development loans. And then also helping them assess the best type of organizational status to set up as well moving forward. And that's also looking at board development. So helping groups identify potential needs that aren't currently met by the volunteer sitting around the table with them at that time. And then once we begin working on organizational technical assistance, that's when it really starts to dig into the high technical project assistance that Matt will talk about.
Yeah, so once you've identified a site, there's a whole lot of kind of questions that need to be answered before you can even really begin working on a project. So the first one, and this is something that Jim was really, I think, eloquently bringing up earlier, is the affordability analysis. So when we talk about affordability, it's based not on the median income of your town, but on the median income of your whole metropolitan area, and then broken out by family size. So while certain communities may not have very high incomes, overall incomes in Connecticut are very high. So frequently what we see is that the incomes people who do qualify are a lot higher than I think people may fully understand. Additionally, we help groups work through site feasibility. So looking at things like site access, the presence of wetlands, the presence of floodplains, being able to ask those questions up front so that you don't waste valuable time or resources getting too far into some of your site analyses on something that ultimately isn't feasible. Additionally, we can help with selection of either developers or co-developers if you're looking at maybe a larger project that you don't have the financial capacity to take on yourself, or with things like RFPs. So a lot of this work can't happen without professional support. So that includes development consultants who are really well versed in kind of the nuts and bolts of getting things financed and built, architects, engineers, professional property management. All of those professional members are typically solicited by an RFP. So not only do we have draft RFP language, but we also can help with things like how those interviews can be structured so that you make sure you're asking the right questions. There are a number of very qualified architects, consultants, all of those kinds of people. It's really about finding the right fit for you, your community, and what ultimately your project vision is, and then working through the planning and zoning process. So ultimately the goal is to connect you with the resources you need so that you can take on the project yourself. So this has been a really successful model. We've operated this program for 15 years and have supported the development of nearly 650 affordable housing units in 24 communities all over the state. So these projects range from as large as 170 units, I think, in Vernon, and in as small as 1 unit, where there was an older house that needed to be renovated. So I think that these are pretty good. It's a good kind of balance of some different projects that happen in different parts of the state. The top left is Clintonville Crossing in the town of North Haven. Bottom center, you saw already, that is Ferry Crossing in Old Saybrook. Bottom right, again, is Stewart Farms in Kent. So, and then, this is all ongoing. So there are a number of organizations who are continuing this work right now, and they're in various stages. As both of our previous panelists indicated, it's not a short process. Maybe in the best of circumstances, assuming absolutely everything goes right, you could move someone in 4 years, but it never actually happens that way. By the time you start looking at things, you deal with inevitable contingencies that come up, you secure funding and start construction. This is a long lead time item, and it does require definitely a time commitment on behalf of people who are looking to advance this kind of work.
And as Matt mentioned, we've worked all across the state. So there are just over 150 of Connecticut's 169 municipalities that are eligible to participate in housing connections, and that's based on population size. And so on the map here, you can see that in certain parts of the state, we've been very active, Litchfield County in particular. And that's where I was mentioning earlier, word of mouth. One town, sees activity that's happening in other ones, says, hey, what's going on over there? And these conversations take place. And, they can really look to their neighbors. And, when they have someone saying, hey, this program came in, we were able to identify and build housing that was really meeting our local needs here and at a scale that made sense in our community, it creates more comfort for people then to reach out and say, we want to replicate and we want to do that here. We see that that's possible. And in other areas where we haven't worked, that's where we're really looking to identify new partnerships and opportunities to expand housing choice. There were some great questions in the chat that were dropped in about how to expand choice and opportunity around the state. And really it begins by having conversations like these, really talking about what affordable housing is. So that way you can then go and have conversations with your neighbors and then with neighboring communities. And that's hopefully how we want to see this spread. And we are open for referrals. As I mentioned earlier, people can reach out to either Matt or myself to learn more about the Housing Connections program. And the nice thing about this model is that it doesn't have to be fit for one specific type of group. So for example, we've worked with members of town planning and zoning commissions that are currently doing work to create their affordable housing plan. And they want to learn a bit more about this program model. We've also worked with communities of faith, has been another great way for, groups to kind of organically have already come together to identify a housing need in their community, and they can reach out, as well as other volunteers people who come together just because they recognize that there's a need. But ultimately, we're able to provide support to that group and then help them, like I said, through the organizational technical assistance, ultimately form that entity that will move that development project forward. And our contact information is listed here. We can also drop it in the chat. But please, if you have questions, reach out, share this with others that are interested in building affordable housing in their community, but maybe aren't sure where to start. Housing Connections is a great place to look into that. So with that.
Great. Thank you so much. I am going to ask the other members to join us for some additional questions and answers. Second. Okay. All right, so we have lots of questions here, and first I wanted to thank Kasey and Matt. You did a great job with the presentation. We've got lots of questions, so I'm
I'd like to also jump in because LISC was phenomenally helpful in our projects. And I should have mentioned that earlier as I was describing our town center rental project. And I think in the first part, in the technical assistance, and we had Pat Spring spend so many years with our organization helping us find the right project. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And in terms of trying to sell things to towns and neighbors and everybody else, having the right project, not too big, not too small, in the right neighborhood, it becomes much easier to sell. So it is worth looking at a number of different options as you're considering building. And I think that having LISC involved at the beginning really made a big difference in terms of how things happened for us. And then you guys swooped in twice with loans for us. And what's beautiful about LISC and money is that your threshold of risk is a lot lower, higher, however way you want to look at it. Your
threshold is higher.
Yeah. And it makes it fantastic because when we knew we were going to get money back from the historic tax credits, but it was going to be a while before it came through. You guys gave us a loan that helped us cover that gap of funding. So there's a lot of things. These projects are complicated, and having resources like LISC is just amazing.
Yeah, I was remiss too, Kate. I should have championed LISC too. And I'm looking at the two of them, and I saw LISC and I said, gee, that's great. And then I forgot to say anything. But a tremendous shot in the arm for both Ferry Crossing and for the Loft was LISC funding. So, and it's bridge stuff very often, like Kate pointed out. So very appreciative. And I think you're on the Madison project already too, right? Have you been in on that?
We actually have 2 loans out for the Madison project. And we're about to amend it to put out a whole lot more money.
Well, you can tell I'm not the financial guy in the group, so, but thanks again, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. This work doesn't happen without organizations like yours. We're really just here to support the work that you're doing, because there aren't a lot of developers who are advancing affordable housing projects in small and medium-sized communities. So that's, we're here to support that to the best we can.
And having an organization like LISC, I think really helps. I mean, you guys are in Connecticut, you're also in New York, but you're predominantly in Connecticut?
So our headquarters is in New York, but our Connecticut field office is based in Hartford.
Right. Having an organization like you, I think, is what has kept Connecticut in the forefront of affordable housing, really.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to you all. If we have about 15 minutes for questions, if you all don't mind. There was the bottom question there. There was a second part of another question about, it's probably going to be for Kate and Jim, wondering about whether you had to change any zoning regulations or laws or to move forward in your projects? Would you like?
I can say, Jim, do you want to start?
Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, on the town center rentals, we definitely had to, change, we combined two pieces of property and needed to get, changed the affordable, change some language about affordable housing in the zoning regulations in order to make that happen. For Haystack Woods, we actually had to write our own regulation in order to make it happen. There was a cluster housing regulation and it was relatively well written, but when all was said and done, we had the opportunity to write our own regulation within our regulations. We were allowed to write our own regulations. So we created our own overlay zone. We did it as an overlay zone so that if it fell apart, the current owners wouldn't be encumbered by a new zone on their property, which they might not want. An overlay zone made it temporary. And this zone got written once and then it got rewritten when Department of Housing felt that we'd be better off with the town road than the private road. And so that changed all the regulations in that. And we had to go back through for a whole nother text amendment. I spent every month of 2020 at wetlands or planning and zoning meetings in order to get it through. So it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, and there's a lot of opportunity there too.
Yeah, we had similar experiences, but one of the reasons we put Carl Fortuna and Bonnie Riemschneider in the video, if you have the support of the first select person or the board of selectmen, they can do good things because they have a real feel for the other volunteers on boards and commission, and they know how to massage things. And we did have to do a few minor changes to the zoning regulations in both Old Saybrook and in Essex, but I think the way was paved so well that we didn't have to have a major trench battle. That being said, we had a project in Old Lyme that got blown out of the water, much to our dismay, but the opposition can rear its ugly head very quickly, and there were a few problems with it technically, and we decided that was not a hill we wanted to die on, so we backed out of that one. But basically, got the townspeople who were disagreeable to agree that affordable housing needed to happen in their town. So they just didn't want it in that particular location. So it happens.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is more comment and question. I think that many people have hoped that this process would increase racial diversity as well as economic diversity. Are there any thoughts about how to make this happen? Anyone?
I answered a version of this question. I was trying to answer a few of them in text during some of the presentations. One of the things that the state requires is something called an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. So what that does is it's supposed to be a plan for how you market housing to people who are least likely to apply in that community. So if you're working in a community that's largely white, you are required to create a plan for how you will market your housing to people of other races, Black and brown people in particular. There's definitely room for improvement on that, but that is one of the specific requirements for how that can be done. But definitely open to hearing any other strategies that have worked.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is our hope is to maintain the economic diversity that we have in our town. And from a standpoint of racial diversity, it would be wonderful if it increased. The natural flow of things, even with the proper affirmative and marketing plans and all of that, it doesn't happen. And so you're not putting up barriers, which is important, but communities tend to segregate. People tend to go, and I think that's a reality. So I think, it's important to make it so that you've removed as many barriers as possible. And I think the economic pieces in our lily white Northwestern Connecticut is about as good as we're going to do at the moment. And that doesn't mean that won't change.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope it does.
Yeah, thank you. Another question is, are there any notable projects that were developed and not on town sewer and water? That's an issue for us in Marlborough. We're currently drafting our plan and we're holding community forums this week to solicit input and help dispel any misconceptions. Well, I think that you both, Jim, you talked about your projects not being on any common sewer.
Right, they're both the ones that are completed and the one in development in Madison are all septic systems, and it just needs to be the right property with the right density. Really, that infrastructure is not coming to our part of the state anytime soon. And if you have property or you have people who are willing to not necessarily give the property away, but to give it at a price that makes it possible for affordable housing, and it's a piece of property that can be fully utilized for septic, that's a plus. But it's the biggest one I know of is ours in Madison with 32. Well, Matt and Kasey might know otherwise, but I don't know of a project that's strictly on septic bigger than 32 or 35, but it's possible, I guess.
I don't think there's anything that I can think of, but 35 is still a pretty substantially sized project, right? A lot of the developments in Kate's video where they were circled around some common space and parking and were nicely sized were only in the low to mid 20s. So that's certainly something that's very feasible depending on your lot size.
Right.
Okay. And one last question we're going to have time for is, what do you find are some of your biggest obstacles when presenting to communities, in addition to the technical glitches like the water issue or the sewer issue? Aside from those, what are your biggest obstacles? Anyone?
I think initially the misconceptions about what affordable housing was, people have in their head, some people had in their heads that visions of things that were Section 8 housing, or they were they couldn't wrap their arms around affordable. They were always talking about low income. We even had an issue in Old Saybrook. It wasn't one of our projects, but they built a very large 140 apartment complex right next to the railroad station. And a portion of that had to be affordable. And a couple of the municipal leaders, in talking to groups around town, would casually say, oh yeah, there's a low income element in there too, which, it does nobody any good when you mischaracterize how those things are. And we initially did a PowerPoint that we went on the road with, where we had 3 myths to dispel. The first myth was, what does it look like? The second myth was, who are the people who are going to come in there? And the third one was, they're going to overwhelm our schools. Well, first of all, most of the people who need need affordable housing are here already. And right now, we'd love to have somebody overwhelm our schools because we don't have anybody in them. So, you know, the dynamic changes, but it's, you know, it's that whole thing about not in my backyard, that there are a lot of little misconceptions about it. And I think Kate, I don't know if Kate said it earlier, you did in the introduction, Amy, change sometimes comes very hard. And, you know, in my own hometown of Westbrook, I've lived here my whole life. And I constantly tell people we struggle with this idea that, well, that's good enough for Westbrook, you know? Well, what does that mean? Good enough for Westbrook. You know, it's not quite great, but it's good enough for Westbrook. We had a guy get up at a town meeting about 3 years ago that I don't know if we want to redevelop downtown. We don't want Westbrook to look like Essex. Well, I tell you what, there's no way Westbrook is ever going to look like Essex. So don't worry. You know, people just kind of get entrenched and they don't see the vision. And once you bust it down and you confront them with facts, sooner or later they drown in the facts. They really do. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you, Jim. Kate, did you want to answer that real quick?
I think you did a good job on that. You know, traffic is, you know, there are the technical things like sewer, water, traffic, you know, health and safety, wetlands, the Rocky Mountains spotted, whatever it is today. All of those things are the things that come up. And usually those are really masquerading for the not in my backyard, unfortunately. And I think the best thing to do is to dispel those myths as best as possible.
Okay.
To Jim's list, I'd love to add, you know, other misconceptions, you know, a big one being property taxes. Affordable housing developments in the state of Connecticut all pay property taxes. Towns have the option to provide tax abatements if they wish to, but otherwise they will pay full property taxes based on their assessed value. And the other is that affordable housing need is limited to seniors. You know, there seems to be, you know, there's a lot of interest in providing senior housing or housing that's restricted to seniors, but you know, there's need across age divides. And what I think a lot of people are kind of, when they say there's a need for housing for seniors, there's a need for smaller units and handicapped accessibility and universal design. And those are things that seniors need, but you know, also people with physical disabilities or people with smaller families also need. And that's really a way to meet those needs while being as open and accommodating as you can of people who not only currently live in your town, but may wish to move to your town.
That's a great point. Well, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank each one of you. We're so grateful that you were come to share your knowledge and expertise and showing us how it can be done. And we are really inspired and we're really excited. I wanted to say that Code believes strongly in creating housing choices and believes that it's critical to creating a diverse, vibrant community. It's critical for our town. It's critical for our towns like Hebron to be welcoming communities. And we believe that not only is it possible, but that it benefits everyone in our communities. We've compiled a backgrounder on creating housing choices, which we're going to send to all participants. And I encourage everyone to learn about affordable housing, the affordable housing plan in your town, because every one of them is creating this plan and it's due in June. So the normal process is that it requires public comment. And so we encourage you to be active in that process. I wanted to say that we are planning Code's next community conversation, which will be on March 31st at 7 p.m. And we will have Pat Gallagher, who is the town planner, be present to review the Hebron's housing choice plan and the affordable housing plan, essentially. I've seen that Donna in the chat room has included Code's email And so I encourage you to please email the code email or follow us on Facebook if you want more information, or if you want to join us. We're always welcoming new members. And just want to thank you very much, everybody, for attending. This has been a great session, lots of questions and great panel. So thank you so much. And lastly, I want to thank my co-chair, Donna. She works so hard on this and she does a fabulous job getting all the wonderful panelists and organized, and she does a fabulous job, and I want to thank her. So thanks, everyone.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for including LISC.